So, our lecture today will be on respiratory physiology. This is one of the systems you will do in the semester. For physiology, second semester courses, I think you are going to do 4 systems. Alright? 4 systems. One is respiratory physiology. The other one is cardiovascular physiology. And then you have GIT and renal physiology. 4 of them. When the exam, you will write 2 systems in one. So CPS and respiratory physiology, they go together. So you write these 2 systems. You will see questions from respiratory, you see questions from cardiovascular physiology in the exam. And then renal and GIT, they go together. So expect questions, 2 systems in one. But I am going to be taking you respiratory physiology. The other of my colleagues will be there to take you on other systems. So for today is respiratory physiology. So the lecture flow will be, we want to look at the meaning, steps, and functions of respiration. We're going to define that in this class, and also we'll look at the classes or types of respiration. Then after that, we'll look at anatomy of the respiratory system. Anatomy of the respiratory system. That we'll be talking about the tracheobronchial tree. Under that you have the upper and lower respiratory tracts. The upper respiratory tract is also known as the conducting zone of the respiratory system, and the lower respiratory tract is known as the respiratory zone of the respiratory system. When we are done with that, we look at non-volumes and capacities, and then the mechanism of breathing. You all take in air and you bring out air. Okay? What are the mechanisms behind that? You will learn all of that in this class. Okay. Then we'll look at gaseous exchange. Gaseous exchange. Transport of gases between the lungs, the blood, and body cells, tissues, and organ system. How this gas you take in is transported through the blood to reach your body cells, tissues, and organs. Okay? So all of this, gaseous exchange, gas transport in the lungs, exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between air, the blood and blood tissue barrier, and then transport of oxygen in the blood. They are all under transport of gases. It's something we do in this class. Finally, we want to look at how respiration is controlled. Structures in the brain that controls breathing. Because it's not enough saying you are breathing. You take in oxygen and you bring out carbon dioxide. That is primary knowledge. you need to know the structures that compose breathing. That will be a new aspect, and it will be the last thing we'll do in this class. So, the question will be, what is respiration? What is respiration? Is that going to be fast? What is respiration? Respiration, simply defined as the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the environment and the body cells. Exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide between the environment and the body cells. Alright? Actually, there are two classes of forms of respiration. The first one is external respiration, and then you have internal respiration. When we talk about external respiration, we're talking about the exchange of respiratory gases between the environment and the lungs. External respiration, exchange of gases between the environment and the lungs. And then internal respiration deals with the exchange of gases between the lungs and the blood. Remember that the primary function of the blood is to transport respiratory gases. So internal respiration is the exchange of gases between the lungs and the blood. It also deals with the exchange of gases between the blood and the body cells and tissues. Exchange of gases between the blood and the body cells and tissues. Alright? But we'll do all of that in this class. The goal of respiration is primarily to provide oxygen to the tissues and remove carbon dioxide. Types of respiration. There are two types of respiration. Number A, external respiration. And number two is internal respiration. So this is the first type, external respiration. Like I said, it's the exchange of gases between the environment and the lungs. Okay? And then internal respiration is the exchange of gases between the lungs, the blood, and the body cells, tissues, and organ system. Going forward. Any question? No question. Very good. Respiration occurs in 5 steps. It can occur in 5 steps. The first step is pulmonary ventilation. Ventilation of the lung, that is filling of the lungs with air. Step number 1. Step number 2. When the air gets into the lungs, of course, it diffuses. So you have diffusion of oxygen and carbon dioxide through the air-blood barrier. Oxygen diffuses from lungs to blood, and carbon dioxide diffuses from the blood back to the lungs and to the external environment. You shall get to know all of that. Then number 3, the third step, is transport of gases. Transport of gases. Oxygen is transported from lungs body and carbon dioxide from the tissues to the lungs and to the environment. Number 4, diffusion through the blood tissue barrier. Alright? Of course, oxygen diffuses from blood to tissue cells and carbon dioxide is just basically the same thing. But as simple as they sound, they are deep. By the time we get to transport of gases, then you begin to appreciate these steps of respiration. The 5th one, even though it's written cellular respiration, we are actually looking at control of breathing, control of respiration. The brain structures the nerve cells that controls movement of the thoracic cage, the respiratory muscles, to help us take in air and bring out carbon dioxide. Alright? For example, when you take in oxygen, you will notice that thoracic walls are moving upwards, right? Your chest is moving upwards. And then when you bring out carbon dioxide, thoracic wall moves downwards. There are structures controlling the movement, upward movement and downward movement of thoracic cage. Alright, it's not controlled by the oracle in your village. And we are going to look at that under regulation of respiration. Good. I think I've said something about external and internal respiration. But just to summarize, the first and second steps on the previous slides, first and second steps simply describes external respiration, and then the third and fourth and the 5th step summarizes internal respiration. The point I want you to note is that when you talk about internal, external respiration, we are simply talking about how gases are exchanged between the external environment and the lungs. And when you talk of internal respiration, we are looking at how these gases is carried from the lungs into the blood, and then from the blood to the tissues. Internal respiration. Okay. I will go backwards forward. Alright, physical process of gas transport. We have here the external environment, the atmosphere. Okay? The funnel-like structure represents the upper respiratory tract. Okay? From the trachea to the bronchi and their branches, and then the lungs. Take this lung tube here to be what? The trachea. Alright? And then the base of this funnel represents the lungs. And if you come down here, you see its structure. Is it rectangle or square? Square. Okay. This one represents the blood. The blood vessels, of course, blood flows through the blood vessels. So the square-like structure represents the blood. Then you see the greenish structure here, and that structure represents what? Let's say the body cells and tissues. It's written here. Okay? Good. So the process is simple. Oxygen is taken from the external environment. It passes through the trachea, gets to the lungs. Look, this is oxygen. Let's take oxygen. It comes from where? The atmosphere. Okay? From the atmosphere, you take in oxygen. So it passes through the trachea and all other branches. The bronchi, terminal bronchi, respiratory bronchi, gets to the lungs. When it reaches the lungs, it diffuses into the blood. This is the same oxygen. Right? And the blood carries it straight to the tissues. In fact, from the blood vessel, you know, the capillary is the site for exchange of gases and other nutrients between the blood and the tissues. So this oxygen diffuses from the blood to supply the tissues. Okay. Carbon dioxide from the tissues will in turn diffuse into the blood, and then the blood carries it to the lungs, and then from the lungs it goes out to the external environment. And this is how it works. But there are different physiological mechanisms that are responsible for this. And we are going to do all of that in this class. So, let's hold our thoughts. We want to look at a brief anatomy of the respiratory system. And when we talk about the anatomy of the respiratory system, we are looking at the structures or components that forms the entire respiratory systems. They are formed by cells, tissues, and organs. Remember that the system is made up of different organs. Alright? So, the tracheobronchial tree or bronchopulmonary tree or cell. When you hear of anatomy of the respiratory system, think of the tracheobronchial tree. Anatomically, the respiratory system is divided into two. Number A is the upper respiratory tract. I said anatomically, the respiratory system is divided into two. One is the upper respiratory tract, and two is the lower respiratory tract. The upper respiratory tract is made up of structures like the nose, the nasal cavity, the pharynx, the larynx, and others. I will give you the full components of the structures forming the upper respiratory tract. And then lower respiratory tract, formed by the trachea, the bronchi, bronchus, the lungs, the alveoli ducts, and alveoli sacs. We shall come to all of that. Okay, air normally passes from the trachea to the bronchi to their branches, and the bronchus, terminal bronchus, respiratory bronchus. They are also known as secondary bronchus and tertiary. Alright? From there, it enters the respiratory bronchus. And from the respiratory bronchus, it enters the alveoli ducts to the alveoli sac, and then the alveoli. What you are expected to do is to note these structures from upper to lower, that is upper respiratory tract and lower respiratory. I don't know whether you can see the slide. Can you see the slide? Yes, sir. Okay. From the nose to the last structure forming the respiratory system. First is to identify them, and I don't want us to go into their description. I wouldn't want you to go into their description. You can do that in anatomy class. But note their functions. Structures forming the respiratory system, beginning from the nose to the pleura, and over here you have their functions. Okay? So you look at their structures and their functions. Good. Let's not waste our time on that. I said anatomically, the respiratory system is divided into upper and lower respiratory tracts, right? Good. Now, physiologically, the same respiratory system is divided into two types. So you have the conducting zone and the respiratory zone. The conducting zone and respiratory zone. Anatomically, it is divided into upper and lower respiratory tract. Physiologically, it is divided into conducting zone and respiratory zone. So from the trachea down to the terminal bronchus represents the conducting zone. Alright? And then from the respiratory bronchus down to the alveolar sac represents the respiratory zone. The conducting zone is made up of components such such as the nose, the nasal cavity, the pharynx, the larynx, trachea, primary bronchi, to the terminal bronchi, bronchioles. Alright? Whereas the respiratory zone is made up of the respiratory bronchioles, the alveoli ducts, and the alveoli sacs. So there's also a sac here. So you have respiratory bronchioles, alveoli ducts, and alveoli sac. Okay? These two zones have a significant physiological significance. For the conducting zone, the primary function is to provide fairly rigid conduits for air to reach the gas exchange sites. Okay? So it actually cleanses the air. It humidifies the air and warms the incoming air, making the air you take from the external environment to be free from germs, bacteria. Okay? So what it does is to actually cleanse or filter the air, making them somewhat free from irritants such as dust, bacteria, and other things that can cause respiratory distress. This zone of the respiratory tract is not involved in gaseous exchange. I repeat, this zone, that is the conducting zone of the respiratory tract, is not involved in gaseous exchange. Its primary role is to carry the air from the atmosphere to the lungs, and it filters and cleans the air. Whereas the respiratory zone is actually the site where gaseous exchange occurs. Okay? Respiratory zone, that is the lower respiratory tract. I hope that is understood? Yes, sir. Good. Going forward. On the slide, over here we have 0 to 23. This is 0 to 23. And if you look over here, you see that this area, from the trachea down to the terminal bronchi, represents the conducting zone. And over here, you have the respiratory zone. Okay? So from 0 to 16, there is 16 here. 0 to 16, from 0 to 16th generation is the conducting zone, whereas the respiratory zone begins from the 17th generation down to 23rd generation. means that the upper and the lower respiratory tracts, they divide into tiny branches until it gets to the alveolar sac. So we are going to look at the divisions, beginning from the trachea down to the alveolar sac. Alright? The trachea divides to form two branches, that is the right and the left bronchus. These two branches further divide. We are talking about the tracheobronchial tree. Alright? These two branches further divide to form the bronchioles. And these bronchioles will further divide to form tiny branches known as the terminal bronchioles. The terminal bronchioles will further divide to form respiratory bronchioles, which will in turn divide into tiny branches known as alveolar ducts. The alveolar ducts will in turn divide to form sac-like structures known as the alveolar sac. Did it enter so? It did not enter. It's very simple. These structures are divided into tiny branches. You all have them in you. If you want to open your chest and bring out your respiratory tract, do you even do dissection? Oh yeah, I know. Why I don't say students not doing dissection? Evidence, you don't do dissections. They are scared of cadavers. So what I'm saying is the trachea will subdivide into two branches known as what? The right and the left bronchi. Bronchi is for plural. These bronchi will further divide into tiny branches to form what? To form what? The bronchi will divide into sub-branches to form what? Bronchioles. Alright? Look. Over here is the bronchus. We have right and left. This is the trachea, right? This structure you see here from here down to here, the trachea. It divides into two branches. That is the right and the left bronchi. These two branches will further divide into tiny branches to form what? Bronchioles. Good. the bronchioles will further divide into tiny branches, which will now land in terminal bronchioles. And it is this terminal bronchioles that ends the upper respiratory tract, or the conducting zone of the respiratory system. Now, the division doesn't stop there. The terminal bronchioles will further divide into right and left branches, forming the respiratory bronchioles. These respiratory bronchioles will further divide into branches. It is always right and left. Okay? But if you see the continuation here, it's just one side. There's also the other part. They're always right and left. So the respiratory bronchioles will divide into right and left branches. But this time, it has a sac like some spine or dots, and that division will give rise to what is called the alveolar ducts. It is these alveolar ducts that will now give rise to what is known as the alveolar sacs. And if you look at the structure, it is different from what you see in the upper part of the respiratory system. Because this time around, you see it having something like this. Like sacs around each of the branches, and that thing is known as the alveolar sac. Gaseous exchange actually occurs within these alveolar sacs. We shall get to that. So, how that is understood, the whole of this depicts what we know as the Tracheobronchial tree. Okay. Or it's still the same thing. So this is what I was explaining, although I used the diagram to make it clearer for you to understand. So the respiratory zone, like I said, is made up of respiratory bronchioles, the alveolar ducts, the alveolar sac. Okay? These respiratory bronchioles and the alveolar ducts are responsible for 10% of gaseous exchange. The alveoli itself are responsible for the other 90% of gaseous exchange. When we get to gaseous exchange, we'll talk more on that. So, but to end this section of the class, we'll just look at some clinical importance. There are sometimes you might have infection in your respiratory system that may even lead to surgical removal of one or two branches in the respiratory tract. or structures there. Okay? So we have segmental resections, segmentectomy. This is the removal of an infected segment of the respiratory tract. It's a surgical procedure, especially when that part has been infected. Because if you don't remove that surgically, it will infect other areas. Okay, but note that infections hardly ever crosses the intersegmental septa. We have septum or septi, surrounding the lungs, and this helps to protect the respiratory tract from being infected. All right. But there are certain infections like tuberculosis that can cross these segments and infect a particular segment or even all segments within your respiratory tract. And that is why tuberculosis is a very dangerous disease. Is it communicable? Is it communicable? Okay. And then we have cancer. You have cancer of the lungs. Then it's dangerous. It's another dangerous disease of the respiratory system. Then postural drainage. This can occur when there is excessive accumulation of secretions in the bronchi, which may lead to infection. What is postural drainage? Such secretions can be drained out of the lungs by placing the patient in a posture. Names have meaning: postural drainage. In a posture that will help the infected fluid to be drained from the lungs by gravity. As you progress, you see a lot of cases, and one thing you need to do is to, help yourself to be able to identify these cases and learn their solutions. Alright? It doesn't matter the area you are, your field, whether anatomy, MLS, or nursing. It's good that the nursing students, they've started their posting, so they get some clinical experience. It's good. Because you'll be posted to different, sectors in the hospital. You see a lot of cases. The med lab too, they do their posting. Have you started? Maybe from 300-400 level. Be posted to different fields within that your lab. We have specialties in med lab, right? So you have to go around hematology, microbiology, whatever. You will go around. And then for the anatomy, we also have clinical anatomy, where your own posting is in form of IT. Alright? A 300 level second semester. You go for IT, and then you get some vital skills. There are a lot of things you can do in anatomy, because some of you think maybe if you are in anatomy, you are as good as useless, or you are wasting your time in the university. In fact, your colleagues in nursing and med lab will be telling you that when you graduate, you go and teach biology. You go and work in mortuary. I know. Don't listen to them, it's not true. There's what we call clinical anatomy. There's also clinical physiology. And that's the reason we send students on IT so they can get this clinical, the machines, the physiologists and anatomy operate. None of you in nursing can operate that machine, even the doctors cannot. No, you don't understand. It's not what you see here in the lab. We have sophisticated machines. We talk about anatomy, there are many of them. So they can fit it anywhere and not going to work in mortuary. Look, even if as an anatomist, if you open a mortuary, you make money. It's true. No, let's face it. You know, the problem is that your department don't conduct career prospects for you guys. Career prospects. You need to, drag your lecturers to come and have a talk with you so that you know what you are looking at in the future. So you don't have the mindset that when you finish from there, you go and start washing their bodies. Look, you can open a mortuary and employ people to be doing that. You make your full money. You look at the business angle of your career and become very, very wealthy. Let's not forget the fact that anatomists are paramedics and they work hand in hand with surgeons in the hospital. In fact, for every surgical procedure to be carried out, you should have an anatomist. That is the proper thing to do. That is the proper thing to do. No. It's not a joking matter. No. It is only here in Nigeria where you see a lot of rubbish. The doctor is here to perform surgery. You see an anatomist directing the doctors where to cut, how to assess the organ, so that there will be no mistakes. And they are paid heavily for that. Do you know how much they pay paramedics abroad? You don't know. So let's forget about